All right, everyone, this is the final exam study guide. 4 questions. You will be randomly assigned 2. First question is from chapter 11. Analyze how stop and frisk policies, disparities in traffic stops, and police brutality result in what many call racial profiling. So remember, you're going to talk about each one of these things separately. Don't just lump them together and make a vague or general statement. Talk about each one. Remember to give examples to support your discussion. Explain how the 2 approaches discussed in the text, and those 2 approaches I put in parentheses here, the use of body cams and community policing. Again, you're going to talk about each of these things separately. How might these help to reduce racial profiling? Discuss how the wealth gap in the criminal justice system affects people from the upper and lower classes. So you can forget about all the other classes in between, just those 2, upper class and lower class. Make sure that you give examples to support your discussion about how that wealth gap affects people in each of those classes. Do you think the term criminal legal system is a better name for what is currently called the criminal justice system? Explain your opinion. It doesn't matter to me which one of those you think is the better name for what we currently call the criminal justice system. Maybe you think the current name works just fine. Okay, tell me why. Maybe you think the criminal legal system is a better name for it. Tell me why. Remember to support your opinion. Question 2 is from chapter 13. Discuss at least 4 school inequalities that contribute to the educational gap between these 2 groups. Okay, so the 2 groups are the low income and the working class kids, and the middle class and the upper class kids. So choose 4 school inequalities, can be any 4 that are discussed in the textbook. And then tell me how those inequalities contribute to that educational gap. Obviously, we know that middle and upper class children do much better within the more typical educational systems because of better funding in those schools, because of the tracking that they often are tracked into, the upper echelons of tracking, etc. So make sure that you go into some detail here, regardless of which of those 4 school inequalities you choose. Choose at least 2 suggested ways to improve schools, and discuss whether you think these efforts would work and the likelihood that communities will implement them. So again, there are some suggestions in the textbook about how to improve schools. So choose 2 of them and discuss whether you think those would work and whether it's likely that communities would implement them. And again, support your ideas. Finally, do you think schools are the great equalizer in the U.S.? Here, it's just your opinion. Schools have often been called the great equalizer because the idea is you don't have to be a wealthy child or a child from a wealthy family. You can go to any public school in the United States. If you work hard and you study hard and you do all the things you're supposed to do, you can succeed. And so many people think of them as the great equalizer. What do you think, based upon what you've studied in this chapter? Maybe you agree. Great. Give me your support for that conclusion. Maybe you don't think so, but your support for that conclusion. Question 3 is from chapter 15. Explain evidence of the declining trust and faith in American social institutions. Okay, so the authors provide some evidence, or at least evidence that they argue is some proof of the declining trust and faith in American social institutions. And so explain what that evidence is. Discuss how trust and confidence in institutions might be restored. And again, the authors have some suggestions for how we can actually restore trust and confidence in the social institutions in the United States. In your opinion, which institutions are most at risk of failing right now? Okay, so do you think it's our governmental systems, our educational systems? Do you think that it's our healthcare systems? What do you think is most at risk of failing right now, and why? Tell me why, with at least 2 examples for why you reach that conclusion. Analyze at least 2 things that can be done for each institution you discuss to help address the problems you outlined. Okay, so what are 2 things that might help address the issue, and how well do you think those 2 things could help address the problems? Maybe you don't think there's any solutions, any ways to address the problems. That's okay too, just tell me why. Question number 4 is from chapter 10. Discuss how World War II changed the perception of war among Americans. You'll recall that in the chapter, there's a discussion about how previously wars had not really been fought on American soil. Even the Mexican-American War was not fought on American soil. It was fought on Mexican soil. And so the World War II, well, first, before we got involved in World War II, because we had not been, first when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, that was really the first time that people living in the United States had a sense of what it feels like to have your country attacked. People in Europe had known this for centuries at different times. People in Africa, etc., Asia. But in this country, except for Native peoples, there never really had been any experience with being attacked on your own soil, as I said, except for Native peoples on this continent. So how did that change the way that Americans began to think of war? How did it change the way we thought about our own vulnerability? Explain how the U.S. and other countries differ in war preparation. For example, defense spending. And of course, other ways too. Tell me at least 2 ways, okay, that we differ. Discuss the social and individual impacts of war. So, of course, there are individual impacts of war for those people who go off to war, for their families, but what are the greater social impacts of war as well? Again, support your discussion with examples. In your opinion, what types of wars are just wars? That is, what types of wars are wars that are morally or ethically right? And so there's no right or wrong answer here, just tell me. Give me 2 examples that help explain why you think that certain types of wars are more just than others. That's it. You know the drill. If you study, prepare, you'll do fine. And one thing to keep in mind is that for this exam, because the course closes on Sunday, you cannot turn in any late submissions. So if you want to try to make sure that you have a second attempt, just in case your first attempt doesn't go well, you should try to do this earlier in the week and not wait till the last part of the week, because I will try to grade those tests that come in early in the week. And toward the weekend, I can't guarantee that I will do that. So plan accordingly.